Welcome to EPM Partners Program Management Made Easy Project Server 2013 webinar. It's great to have you with us this afternoon and we hope you enjoy the webinar. So to kick off the webinar, we're just going to open up a poll while we wait for everybody to join us. The poll question that we have today is, in the context of program management, what features are most important to you?
Okay, so while we're just waiting for everybody to select from the quick poll that we've just launched, we have our speaker today is Dan Stouffer, and he is one of our senior consultants at EPM Partners. He's got a really strong background in project management and IT, and he's worked with Microsoft's EPM tool since MS Project Central was released in 2000. So welcome Dan to our webinar today. We're looking forward to hearing you speak.
Thanks, Chantal, and nice to have everyone online today. I can see quite a bit of action here on the poll that's going through, and I think, Chantal, you're getting the same results there. It looks like the majority of people are actually going with all of the above. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct, yeah, 50%.
Okay, well, thanks for your responses there. If you haven't voted yet, please click on one of those options. It just demonstrates that we know you're there and you're hearing us nice and clearly. Chantal will keep me up to date with the latest on that. But I'm actually going to now continue with our presentation. So as was indicated by Chantal, we're talking today about program management, specifically within the Project Server 2013 environment. So I have a handful of slides before we move to a demo. The big question, a slightly flippant way to start it all, but I guess if we can't spell it, it's a difficult point to define. I have noticed in my experience that there are two ways of spelling program, and organisations are fairly strongly one way or the other. I did a little bit of research, and it would seem that the program spelt with an ME on the end has come from the British heritage, and that was because they used program without an M and an E to refer to computer programs or programming. Americans and Canadians combined both, and they just used the single spelling of the word for both uses. And Australians generally go with that approach that the Americans and Canadians also adopted. Having said that, many of us Aussies have British heritage, and you'll note today in the demonstration environment that program with an ME is used consistently, so apologies if any of you take exception to that. Moving forward, what is program management? So what better source than Wikipedia to get an answer to a question like that? Of course, I looked at the PMI and PMBOK definitions as well as the Prince2 and the Managing Successful Programs, but I think the Wikipedia one probably sums it up in the simplest of expressions. It's about managing several related projects, often with the intention of improving performance or achieving a goal in some way. Program managers typically want visibility of all the projects in their program. They would like visibility of the status of deliverables associated with each of those projects. Managing cross-project dependencies seems to be a key area of interest, and I think some 25% of you flagged that as being a key feature that you were interested in. And then finally, access to data to support decision-making at the program level. So in the context of the EPM solution, there's probably three approaches to program management. These terms are terms that I use, so they may not be shared by other consultants. But my descriptions are a virtual program, a physical program, and a combination of both. So in the case of a virtual program, what we really have is a group of projects that are associated with a program. So the program itself does not have a schedule, it does not have any risks or issues, it is not specifically managed by a particular person in the context of an official owner in the system for a program. It is just a collection of projects that are linked by this metadata value, if you like. Risks and issues are typically raised at the project level on the project sites, and a common configuration to support this is the option to flag when a risk or an issue is considered to be a program risk or issue. So a project manager is adding a risk. One of the options is this a program level risk? And they would say yes or no. And if they were to select yes, then that risk or issue or other artifact would then achieve visibility through reporting. And a report would be generated which would filter out all the risks and issues and only display those which were set to be program level. This is quite a simple option, and in many scenarios this approach to program management works quite well. A second option is what I'm calling a physical program, where the program itself is an entity on its own right. And in fact, we would use the project entity to be associated with the program. So we would create a line in the system, if you like, that represents the entire program. In this case, then, this program has an owner, just like a project has a project manager. This program has a site, so program level risks and issues are logged on the program site. It has its own schedule, and that allows the coordination of program level activities and coordination activities that perhaps are not represented in the sub-projects. And if required, we can often produce a program status report in a very similar fashion to how we would produce a project status report. Now, option 3 is really a combination of options 1 and 2, and that's probably what I'm going to spend most of my time demonstrating today. We'll start with option 1, the virtual program, and then we'll pretty much move into option 3. Before we do that, I just have a couple of screenshots here to try and support this concept. This first screenshot represents a project center view, and what you can see here is a collection of projects, and they are grouped by a program. Now, this is what I was meaning by the concept of a virtual program. That program essentially exists at that yellow line. So the program cost, the program start dates are all rolled up from the projects that are associated with that program. The risks and issues, as indicated by these icons here, are captured on the individual project sites. And it's at those sites, if necessary, that they are flagged as being program level, but the program itself exists really here with this grouping row, if you like. Hence, it's a virtual program. We report on the program by running a report like this, which demonstrates a certain program, the projects that are in it, their traffic lights, their status. We report on risks and issues through the option that I described. And you see here a parameter to only include program risks, to only include program issues. So by selecting these boxes and selecting a suitable program at the time of running the report, an organization can essentially focus in on just the risks and issues that are associated with a certain program. So this is option 1, the virtual program, and like I said, it's quite a good option. The only things that it doesn't really support is tasks being managed at the program level, and by that I mean tasks that are not represented in any of the other projects that are associated with the program. And also the fact that risks and issues are all flagged at the project site level, and there is no sort of program level entity to capture those. If we go to option 2, I'm calling this the physical program. In this case, we use a project center entity to represent the program. And this then allows for the program tasks, risks, issues, and other artifacts and documents to be managed independently. Option 3 is essentially a combination of both. And so what you can see here is the yellow line representing the entire program, but highlighted in blue is that project center line entry, which also represents a program. And it is the entity which probably brings all of these other aspects together, all of these other projects together. Now, as you can see, costs could be managed at the project level, as is in this case, so there are no costs coming from the program level entity, or vice versa for that matter. We could actually have all the costs zero in the projects and managed here, or a combination of both. So probably now would be a good time to move from the slides to a physical demonstration. And we're going to start in what's called the Project Web App, which is the interface that many of you would be familiar with that are using Project Server already. When you log into the Project Web App, you get a home page much like this one. I'm using a demonstration environment that we call Showcase, and I'm browsing to the Project Center to observe our projects. Now let's look at, first of all, option 1, which is where we don't have a physical entity per se, but we do have a group of projects that are associated with a certain program. So here we have this yellow line grouping the 5 projects below with that certain program. We have those rolled up values that I mentioned before. We see risks, issues being captured at the project level. And in this particular case, there's a project here. It has risks, issues, and documents. If I scroll through, for example, to say the risks for this particular project, we'll see that there's a configuration to support the program level identification of risks. If I drill into this risk, at the bottom here I can flag whether this item is a program level risk or issue. Now I'm putting this particular risk into an edit mode, and I'm going to flag it to say yes it is. This particular risk is applicable at the program level, and it's just to help you remember it, it's called eBurn, a fairly humorous choice of term for this risk. And it's stored on a project site which is dedicated to a certain project called the biothermal air heating system. So when I return to the project center, this is the project that we were looking at. It's part of the Innovation and Emerging Technologies program, and I'm then able to drill in to run some reports and in fact bring back that risk to the reports. So if I do that, I can run into the reports. Now the ones I'll be using today use a reporting technology known as SQL Server Reporting Services. And let's take a look at a couple of the reports that would be applicable if we were managing programs using the first of these options. So firstly, I'll go to the portfolio status report. And in this case, the term portfolio could be replaced with program. And we're going to drill in and select, if we've got the right one, some parameters to generate this report. This particular report uses some historical traffic lights, so I'm just selecting some date ranges for those. Generating this report, and this report will now go and show us a program report for that business revitalization project or program. And so again, what we're talking about here is the program existing in that sort of virtual form, where it's a metadata value associated with the projects, and we report on it and we view it in the project center. Now in this case, I believe I've selected the wrong program. I'll just rerun that report. Hopefully this time the risk associated with the biothermal ear project will present.
And while that's loading, if anybody has any questions for Dan, feel free to type them in the question box. We'll happily take questions throughout the webinar and also at the end, so feel free to ask any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Chantal. And so you can see here in this particular case that when I ran or reran that report for the light program, the project is here represented and that risk is coming through here. Now obviously this particular report doesn't give us a great deal of visibility into what that risk is, and so at a time like that, when we would then rerun or run a different report, perhaps one like this, a risk and issue report, and at this time select the program in question. Get that righted. And here's our options to only include the risks and issues that have been flagged as program level. I seem to be selecting the okay. So in this particular case, it's not the item that I was intending to present, but hopefully that gives you the idea that we can drill into those items that have been flagged as being program applicable and then present those in a report like this one. I'm going to return now to the project center and we'll look at the second option, which is essentially where we have so this business revitalization program represents the second option. And what we have here is the same as option one, in that all of these entities are associated with the business revitalization metadata value, but we also have an independent entity to represent the program. Now this particular entity is different from the other projects. We create this program level entity in the same way, but as you can see by clicking new in the project center, we have different types of projects, or in this case a program, and you can see its description and the fact that it has a different icon. And when we go in to create a program, we have a different view that pops up with program level metadata that is appropriate, and other project data which is only applicable at the project level is basically taken away. And so here's one that we created earlier that I'll click into now. And so you get to see some of that base style of information that is captured for this program. Over on the left, it has less online forms than your average project, and that's because it is really a subset, or in some cases it has unique fields that apply only at the program level. In this case, I have included a form called Project Status Updates, and that form allows us to basically populate a project status report for this project. So as you look through this, you can see, without drilling into all the details, some of these traffic lights are calculated, system generated if you like. Others in this case are subjective, project manager nominated. And then we have some updates that have been recorded here as sort of anecdotal updates from, in this case, the program manager. Now you'll observe that the reason for this project being reported red, according to the program manager, is that there's been a delay in the supply chain. This is delaying the whole program. It's likely to blow out by about a month. And there's a reference to an issue on the program level site for more information. So what this means then is that if the program manager wants to generate a program level report, or sorry, a program status report, they can go to the report center, run the project status report, which in this case we're just using the same status report that is run for a project, but running it on this program entity, and giving the program manager that same reporting functionality that is there for the project managers. And so you can see that in this particular program, we've got our general data. We can see there's some issue here. Looking down those fields that the program manager had entered about this issue with the supply chain are visible. You can see the link to issue 1. And if I was to actually click here to be taken to the site, I'm now going to drill into this program, and as I said, it has its own risks and issues. Drill into the issue to see this supply chain issue and what it is that's currently planned to be done to respond to this. So the key difference here is that this particular approach to program management allows for the program to have its own site, as you can see here. The risks and issues, as you saw previously, can be captured and managed at the site level, as can documents, for example, that are applicable for the entire program. In addition, you can run your project status report for the program and share that with stakeholders as you typically would. Now, further to this, if we return back to our project center and drill in again to this program, it also has a schedule of its own. And those of you that are using the later versions of Project Server would be familiar with the online editing functions of the toolset. So here we can see a handful of tasks which are specific to this program. And we'll have a look in the subsequent section or session after this as to how it is that we can then link back to some of these key milestones to other projects within the same program group. Chantal, I might ask you if we could maybe run that poll now just to see if we get some feedback from our attendees today.
Sure, no problems. The one that would best apply to their environment?
Yes, please.
Okay, no problems. So our next poll that we'll be launching now is, of the program management options presented, which one would best apply to your environment? So it'd be really great if you could all select an option that we have there. And while we're getting those results through, we've had a couple of comments from our attendees today. Really valid comments rather than questions, which is really good to see that everybody's paying attention. But the whole of program project approach gives the ability to collect project outputs and feed into a program schedule, which can then be used to monitor business change initiatives and benefits. What do you think about that, Dan?
Yeah, look, it's certainly a valid comment, and I'll be looking forward to demonstrate some of those sort of scheduling options in the following section of this presentation.
Fantastic, and we've just got the results that have come through, and we'll just share those with you. So as we can see, the majority there have selected virtual physical blend.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree that that is the approach which most of my clients would tend to adopt. Let's now sort of take it to the next level, which is now focusing on the schedule, which one of you raised already in your comments. So about this time, I'm going to move to Microsoft Project, and we're going to continue to work with that program level entity as well as one of the projects that is associated with that same group of, or that same program. So firstly, let's open up my program file. Now you can see I've opened it recently, so it's in my recent projects. And it's a fairly simple schedule, just a handful of tasks to really demonstrate what a program level schedule might look like. I know some of you tend to have larger schedules at the program level. For the purposes of today's demonstration, I just wanted to bring attention to the fact that there may be some activities that exist only at the program level that don't exist at the other related projects, but also the ability to drive interdependencies from the program level to other projects within that program, and then vice versa to perhaps pull updates from the schedules of other schedules and see the impact here. So as you can see at the moment, a very simple schedule in front of us. Mostly we've got a couple of basic tasks, and then underneath that we've got some what I'm calling key milestones, and these are driven by constraints, and you'll note that the final sign-off, in addition to having a constraint, has a deadline, and that will become significant as we proceed through the demonstration. I'm just going to check out that program so that we can perform some edits on it, and I'm now also going to open a project which has been associated with the same program, in this case called ERP integration. So at this point we have two totally separate entities, but the expectation would be that frequently a dependency on the project from the program would drive part of its delivery, and at other times, conversely, a dependency on the program to the project would impact it. So what we're now going to do is look at a way of viewing both of these entities in the same shell, if you like. And the way that I tend to do that is I have them both open at the moment. You can see that I have these two items. And what I would like to do is see them both in a new window. So I select new window, both of the entities, and OK. And you can now see that we have these little lines here which represent each of the individual entities. So there's our program, and then here's our ERP project. Let's just adjust our screen so we can get a sense of where things are currently lying. As it would appear right now, at our program level, the activity is all happening in July, but as it turns out within the ERP, a lot of these activities are happening earlier, including the testing phase here, which is happening in April. So I'm going to simulate a dependency from the program level to the project level relating to testing. And I'm going to say that this particular milestone here, which is currently falling on the 14th of July in the program, needs to be reached before the project can start its testing phase. So I've selected the row that represents the driving milestone from the program level, and I'm scrolling down into the tasks now that are represented in the project, and I'm going to link to this phase. I'm going to hold down Control and select this whole testing phase. So you can see I've got those two tasks highlighted. And then, using just standard relationships, I'm going to create a link. Now what you'll observe happens there is that a predecessor is created, and the predecessor in this case is to another project, in our case a program, and a particular task within that. So we've created now this cross-project dependency, and if I was to display successor column, you can see that this task now has a successor in a dependent project. Further to that, we may have a relationship that goes the other way, in that we may have a situation where a delivery of this in the project might actually be impacting the program. And so I'm going to do something similar. I'm selecting a task quite low down the schedule there towards the end at the project level, scrolling right back up to my program level, and oops, sorry, forgot to hold control down, so let's do that again. Holding down control this time, and back to the top, and creating another dependency. I might just hide this column. So I've zoomed out, and what you can now see is we have one dependency being pushed down from the program to the project, and another being received from the project back to the program. Now the actual entity that I have created these dependencies in, as you can see, is called Project 3. At the moment it's just a temporary shell, and it doesn't actually need to be permanently saved. It's an option, of course, to save this, what's called a master project, both to the project server or even to publish it out to the project center. But actually saving it is not mandatory. I can actually close Project 3 and simply save the changes to the projects that were embedded in it, and those relationships will be maintained. So the concept of the master or a permanent master project is somewhat optional. You don't have to save this entity which has them both embedded. You can create it each time you need it, although of course many organizations do choose to have permanent master projects. Now in this case, I am actually going to do that. I'm going to save it. You'll observe the prompts now. Do I want my changes to go through to the other two, or the program and the project that I have open? I'm saying yes to ERP integration, and I'll also say yes to the program. I'm getting some messages there to basically advise me of those dependencies. Now, when I have this master project now open, I'm in a position to start looking at critical path analysis. And for those of you that are familiar with critical path analysis in the latest versions of Project Server, it's really quite straightforward these days. We simply use the format ribbon and tick the box for the critical path. And what you'll see at the moment, I tick that box, and this item here turned red, and probably not a lot more. And this is the downside of using constraints in your schedule, because what's basically happening here is I have a task falling right at the end of the project. It's driven by a constraint. There is free time, if you like, or slack prior to that activity. So the calculation here is saying that there are no other activities that are really pushing out that end date, and so the only critical activity here is this final task. And that's somewhat misleading, but it is part of understanding how Microsoft Project calculates the critical path in a situation like this. But we could make things a little bit more interesting by increasing the duration of some of the activities that lead up to this. So what we might do, I think that's already quite a big number, but let's double that just for demonstration purposes. And now what we have is considerably more tasks in the red. You'll observe that even so, these activities that were upstream, if we could use that term, are still considered non-critical because they're all happening prior to that testing section of the project. And you'll recall that the reason why testing has been pushed out here is because there is this dependency from the program level coming down. So basically, there's now slack in the project for everything up until that testing stage. However, once we hit the testing stage, the entire project almost becomes critical. There are some tasks where the relationships allow for them to be considered to be non-critical, but in general, the entire project is critical once we hit that point. Now, moving right back up to the program level, you may note that we now have an alert here on this task, the final sign-off, and that's because it's going past its deadline. Now, I did try to bring to everyone's attention that I'd set a deadline on that task, and so I'll zoom back out a little so we can see this. This little green arrow was my deadline date, and we can see that that's now being exceeded by probably 6 weeks or thereabouts, and as a consequence we are getting this red alert. Now, just a reminder, the deadline setting is simply set by going to the Advanced tab of Task Information and then setting the deadline value. Now, that deadline was set prior to us extending the duration of this task right down here, but because we pushed out that task, the flow-on effects mean that we now at the program level have a delay to our final sign-off. And so this then allows the program manager to be aware or updated of delays or otherwise at the project level when they're fed through to their milestones. And as a consequence, alternately, if the program manager is able to negotiate, in this case, an earlier release to test, then that could well bring, or would well bring, the dependent tasks in the project to an earlier date. So let's simulate that right now. This whole testing plan is starting on the 14th of July at the project level as a consequence of the dependency on this release to test at the program level. So if I was to change the date associated with that, and I'm using constraints today just simply for the purposes of demonstration, and let's say we were to bring that forward by a month, that has an immediate impact on the testing dates here. So we're no longer in July, we're now into June. Critical path is probably changed a little, might not still be enough to bring our end date in, so we're still not quite meeting the deadline date for the final sign-off, but again the interdependency here is demonstrated. So what I will now do is close this sample master project, and I'll now show you how each of the independent entities or the project and the program look when we're viewing them just as single items. You got any questions there, Chantal, at the moment?
We do. We have one question. It might have been for a little while back in your presentation, but it's, hi Dan, if I understand correctly, program level risks raised at the project level aren't replicated in the program site's risk log. Is that correct, and would it be achievable?
Yeah, great question, and it's a frequently asked question, and it is going back a little way into the presentation, but the whole reason for the approach that we've presented today is because if you flag a risk or an issue at a project site, it is not automatically going to be copied in some way to a program level site. And that's regardless of how you achieve the creation of the program entity. So for example, if you had a master project like I've just created, if that was published, even so it is not going to automatically amalgamate all the risks and issues that might be loaded at the project site level to its project site. And when you think about that, although initially it probably sounds desirous, that amalgamation would actually be quite difficult to control, because many risks and issues would be automatically getting pushed up to the program level, which would probably make for more information or too much an oversupply of information in that sense. So the options, I guess, are either flag them at the risk and at the project level and bring them up through reporting. But the other option, which I may not have explained fully, if you use what I was calling option 2 or the mix of option 3, the project managers can be encouraged to raise program level risks and issues on the program site directly. And of course the business process is to be defined at each organization, but typically what would happen is a project manager would go and raise a risk or issue on the program level site and then assign that risk or issue to the program manager for them to reassess and then manage it from there. And so that makes quite a nice way of differentiating between the project level risks and issues and those that affect the whole program. Are there any other questions there, Chantal?
No, that's all at this stage, but keep them coming. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to pop them in the question box.
Okay, so I'm now looking at the schedule for the project itself, and what you'll observe here as I move down the schedule towards this testing plan strategy is that there is a phantom, what we call a phantom milestone presented in the project itself. So this little grey line and the grey milestone demonstrates that this particular life cycle phase is dependent on this task, which is external to this project, and hence the term phantom task or ghost task. Conversely, if I was to look at the program level entity in isolation, we can see that here is the task that exists within the program level schedule and its subsequent successor, the testing plan and strategy. We can also see that here we have an external predecessor, and this is the end close phase that came from the project level, which is the reason why this task or this milestone has been pushed out as it has. So we do have quite nice visibility of both the external predecessors and successors at both the program level as well as the project level. So I might just return to the slide deck for a moment just to make sure I haven't missed anything. This was the first demonstration that we've gone to, so I'll move on from there. We've completed the poll. We then have been talking about project interdependencies. I should bring to your attention that the creating of interdependencies between the projects, as I've done through MS Project, is available to any one of the options that were initially presented. So options 1, 2, or 3 will support inter-project dependencies. However, while there are many things that you can now do through the online editing presented by Project Server, cross-project dependencies, it does require Project Professional, the client version of the software. You'll also note that permanent master projects are optional, but you will have to create some temporary master project in order to define those interdependencies. One item I would bring to your attention with regards to permanent master projects, it's a frequent support item for us here, is that sometimes you have organizations, or not an organization, but perhaps a particular user who logs a support item advising that some certain projects have just disappeared. And it's good to note that by default, sub-projects are not displayed. So if you embed projects within a master project, they will actually drop off the list and not be present. And once that project is published, and in my case, I haven't published the project, so it is still visible. But if I had published that master project, that item there would have dropped off. And as a consequence, I would have to tick that box in order for those sub-projects to be displayed. Now, when you tick a box like this, or when you make any changes to your project center experience, it's just applying to you personally. So other users within the organization would also need to tick that box to display sub-projects if you had chosen to publish your master project. And that then brings me to a second related point. Some organizations specifically don't want that behavior to happen, and as a consequence, we are able in the service settings to define what behavior is allowed. And so you can see here I've gone into the service settings and the enterprise settings, and it's this option here that defines whether master projects can be saved and published. So if that was unticked, then the only option available to you when it came to creating interdependencies would be to use a temporary master project. So you would still go into the method that I showed by creating a new window, adding the projects to that window, creating the dependencies, and then when you closed out of that window, you wouldn't save the changes to the shell, but you would save the changes to each of the individual project/program entities. Chantel, can you just see if anyone's got any questions relating to that, because it is a fairly important concept?
Not at this stage, Dan, but as I said, if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the question box.
Okay. I'm getting fairly close to the end of the presentation. Originally, I was intending to also take the session today through the concept of dependencies. Now, dependencies actually is a fairly big topic on its own right, and perhaps we'll struggle to do it justice now, but I will at least bring across the concept of these, so I've been saying dependencies, deliverables, and we've got a link to share with you at the end of this session where you can see a further demonstration of how deliverables can be used. So just to get us started, you've probably seen this little cube icon here on the task ribbon. And the idea here is that you can create deliverables that are in some way associated with the project. Now, part of the challenge, this functionality has been around since 2007, but part of the challenge has been that it's sort of so flexible and not particularly frequently used that often organizations don't benefit from it. I'm just getting a notification here from Chantel that there is a question before I proceed much further.
Yes, I have a question here. What happens if we retract the allow save master project after we have already saved? Do you need a bit more context around that?
So I think what we're being asked here is that if the setting was originally ticked to allow a master project to be saved and published and then removed, I would say my expectation would be that no further master projects would be allowed to be created. I can't imagine that it's going to change any of the data that's currently there. It would be a from that point forward type setting.
Okay, and we do have another question here. It's to perform leveling across many projects simultaneously, do you still have to have all of these open in a project professional session? And it's got a note here, I have not used MS Project Server since 2007 version.
Yeah. Resource leveling is a big topic on its own right, as you're probably also aware. And if you open multiple projects in Microsoft Project at the same time and then perform resource leveling, you can get maximum value out of the prioritization option. So what that means is you can set priority across different projects, and then with them all open, you can run resource leveling, and the system will level in accord with the prioritizations that you set. Having said that, a lot of times what we would do is open the projects that are considered least important individually. So don't open the group of projects, just open one, and then basically level the resources or in that particular project. And because the others are not open, then the leveling function will basically reschedule the activities in the open project to resolve the over-allocations. So I know that that's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but there are two options there. You still can do it the way that you've described, or alternately, you can just open your projects one at a time, starting with the lowest priority projects, knowing that they will be rescheduled around the higher priority projects. Okay,
great. Perfect. Thanks, Dan.
Okay.
I'll let you continue just because we're nearing the hour mark. So.
Yeah, thanks, Chantel. So as I said, we probably won't have the opportunity to complete the concept with regards to deliverables, but it is just getting you started. It is off the task ribbon. There's an option here, and basically we can, and we need to get familiar with all of these concepts. So firstly, you select Create Deliverables from the schedule, and you'll have the option then to either, coming up, so I did do it. You'll observe that by ticking that box, the little cube appears in the indicators column. And what that actually means is that that particular item will be represented on the project site in a deliverables list. And I'll just browse to do that. Now, just realised this particular site doesn't have the deliverables presented on the quick launch, but you can see here, so I'm at the project site, and here is that item that I have just flagged as a deliverable in the schedule. And just to make it easier, I'm going to do a quick modification. Okay. So this is the site that was dedicated for collaboration relating to the program. This is where we flagged the issue earlier, and I now have this link on my quick launch to take me to the deliverables where you can see my release to test, which was flagged in the schedule as a deliverable. So already what we have is the opportunity for a project or program manager to flag items from the schedule and make them appear in a separate little list in a read-only style view on the project site. However, you'll also notice that if this item was to move, so let's push it out into July, and I can save those changes and even publish those changes, but that movement in this deliverable will not be represented on the site until I physically go up here and synchronize those deliverables. So this is part of the reason why people get a little bit confused when it comes to deliverables. So you can see that this deliverable, it's linked to a task in my schedule. However, it hasn't updated. Now that's actually by design. That's the way they are supposed to work. It's just getting familiar with that. So if I was to come back here and now perform a synchronization of deliverables and publish those changes out, we expect that the project site will now be updated with those revised dates.
Now, Dan, I think you've already answered this question in your demonstration, but I'll ask it anyway. Will the deliverable automatically update on the project site when changed on the schedule?
Yeah, so that's definitely what I've just covered there. So the answer to that is no. You need to use that sync deliverables that I've just run through there. So guys, thank you for your time this afternoon. I think I'm going to probably leave it there because the whole deliverables topic is quite a big one. We will put forward a link where you can view more information relating to deliverables after this session. I think, Chantal, have we got a final poll that we wanted to get some feedback on?
We do. We have one last poll for you, and thank you everyone for your attention today. You've been very attentive, which we appreciate. And so our final question, our final poll or question for today is, now that you have seen how the Microsoft PPM solution can support your program management, how likely would you be to recommend or use the PPM solution for program management? So I'll just allow everyone a few minutes to respond. Okay, so the responses of those are very likely, which is really good.
Yeah, that's good feedback. So I guess obviously as part of our promotion of the Microsoft PPM solution in webinars like these is to try and demonstrate what the solution can do and hopefully help the community out there with some of those functions. So I guess that's some good feedback. I noticed, Chantal, that we do have another probably almost 30%, 29% that are saying they'd like some more information. I believe, Chantal, at the end of this there will be an email sent out with contact details.
That's correct, yeah. We'll be sending out a follow-up email to you all, and we'll include the link for more information on the deliverable subject. But if we haven't covered anything or you want some more information, my email address will be on there and we can help you cover those questions offline.
Okay, well, that's probably it from me. So thank you all very much for your attendance today. Chantal, thanks